All right. Hey, everybody. We're back here again today with Corey Flash Miller. And I wanted to bring him on specifically to talk about the AERS system that he's created and really go over the process because I think it's really interesting. I think it's a really important aspect that arm wrestling's been missing. So before we dive into anything too deep, can you just tell us a little bit how it started, what the thought process was, and kind of what you see it becoming as it grows?
Yeah, so I mean, just like everyone else, I've been a fan of rankings and stuff like that for a long time, but it never was, what's the best word to put it, perfect or most ideal. There's always some type of situation, some opinion about something or whatever that never sat well with me when it comes to rankings in general. And so a long time ago, I'd say probably about 6, 7 years ago, I had an idea of a ranking based point system. And from there, it kind of evolved into more mathematical formulas and stuff like that. The ELO system that we're using now was a concept that I looked into, but it's not something I was like super keen on because I was in my mind was trying to figure out how it worked for arm wrestling. But over time, it was mainly like I don't know if you're familiar with what Arm TV had, but Arm TV had like a points based win system, and you would win points based on beating certain people based on they're better than you kind of thing. So I kind of evolved from using that and into more math based and wins losses counted, and eventually elo was one of the things that just made more sense longer and longer it went on. I had a couple of guys that were willing to help me build the math formulas and stuff because they were, the mathematicians and whatnot. Um, but then it was kind of crazy because I was like basically doing it with Excel, and the bracket system's built out of Excel with a bunch of programming. But yeah, I started building it out of Excel, and I had a really good thing going. We started slightly using it in Colorado and Wyoming and New Mexico and Montana. We had like a little ranking kind of thing that was built off of that formula. And about a year after that, I just so happened, like it literally just had to have been like chance, but I had been putting feelers out there for someone to help me. And Frank came along and he's like, "Well, I'd help you program it." And I was like, "Really?" Like, I don't have any money. Like, oh, this is gonna be free. So it's not typical of somebody to like offer services and not have any money back on them. So he's like, "No, yeah, we could figure it out." And so we spent probably, I want to say about 8 months, 9 months, like hammering through every scenario. What if this and what if that and what if this and then working on the site at the same time. And I mean, I have a little bit of background with website designs and stuff, and then he's more of the app developer end of things. So it kind of works together, you know. And it became what it is today. Obviously, we've tweaked a ton of stuff and we've added a ton of stuff. Elo has the best of both worlds, in my opinion. Is it 100% perfect? Uh, Obviously, the main reason main reason why it's not 100% perfect is because I cannot fully guarantee that I'll get every single result,
Right.
and I get 99% of them. I really do. I hammer people all the time, asking and doing whatever I possibly can to get the stuff from them. But there's still paper out there. There's still other systems. There's still crazy brackets that people run, random weird stuff, all kinds of things out there. And we try to make those work. But we're still gonna miss things, it's not gonna be 100, but it's really, really, really close to who is the best right now kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. One thing I really like about it that's been really useful for me is I feel um, like tournament to tournament or like super match to super match, I feel like if I target someone that's about 20 to 30 points higher than me, like if I made good progress, I should be able to make that kind of jump, you know? Whereas like a 50, 70, or 100 point jump is not super realistic, you know? So it's, I think it's
Yeah.
definitely really good in that sense. Uh, And I feel like more places around the country are adopting it. But one thing I've been surprised about is like what do you think? Like, it seems like there's some promoters or there's some pushback or like some people who just don't want to share the results with you guys. Like, is there like some kind of reason for that, or do you think like what do you think the kind of like reluctancy to participate is from some people?
I can tell you those promoters that you're describing right now is very, very, very small. It's within about five or less. Of the hundreds of promoters out there, there's in the United States and Canada now, because we're doing Canada, there's about five people. And they range from all kinds of stuff, dude. Some are just the simple fact that they only know how to do paper and they throw it away, or whatever, which is kind of ridiculous. There's the simple fact that they don't run a bracket. There's a group of people that are not running official brackets in any way, shape, or form. Is I would say it's more closely to a draw system without methodology. So it's basically just like you have five names, you select two, the winner goes in this other box, this one goes in this box, and then they just keep selecting. And they never keep track of who pulls who. So for AERS to work properly, you need to know who pulled who when they pulled who.
Gotcha.
So I could use those, but since they don't keep track, it doesn't matter. And then there's the other people that, and I've heard once or twice now that they don't want to submit it because they fear that people won't come to their tournaments because their ratings will get posted, which I feel like that is a complete cop out. I've only, like I said, I've only heard that about once or twice now. Uh, I don't know why. Regardless of the rating. For the simple fact that I record every single match that you've ever done in arm wrestling, and you can go back 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and say, this is what I did, my accomplishments, my whatever. The simple fact that I even do that would be, in my opinion, worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with that.
I mean, because there's so many times. I mean, I'm sure you have been around. There's so many times where somebody's like, "Oh, I've beaten this guy," and you're like, okay, and then you go look it up, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I guess he did beat that guy, but he lost to all these other people, so maybe it was a one-off or something." But
Honestly, the first thing I do when someone like challenges me to a super match or just is messaging me about whatever or wanting to beat me, the first thing I do is go on the website and be like, okay, well, let's see who you've won and lost against, because it is super useful in that case, because you can kind of have a paper trail where you know off the top of your head it's a little hard to think, okay, well, I've pulled this guy who's pulled him who's done that, but when you can actually go on the website and see all the people he's pulled at all these different tournaments and be like, okay, I've pulled him and let's see how he did, and you can go find that match, and you can kind of get like a good feeler for it. um
we're actually
one
gonna roll a new feature out here that you're gonna love. Then,
Yeah.
yeah, so we have a ton of stuff in the background that we don't post because we don't have time to do it. But one I really like is the fact that you can. We're working on a one where you can do a drop down inside of your profile and type in another person's name and just say, it'll say Corey Miller has pulled, whoever you type, it'll search them up and it'll say win loss record against that person. So you could easily be like, oh, I want to know every time, Corey's beating Jordan Sill, and you press enter and it'll be like Corey beat him 65-0 or something like that, how many times, whatever. So you get quick reference for any single person against another person. Like, I wonder if that guy's beating that guy. Oh, yep, he's lost to him twice.
Yeah,
But
that's gonna be awesome.
lots of really interesting things and statistics just in general that we can pull. You know, the ability to see. We have this thing called paths of victories. So it would be like if I want to compare like you were just saying, I want to compare myself to you, but I've never pulled you, and you've never pulled people I've pulled type of or thing. So what it does is it goes out and finds every single person that I've pulled and every single person you have pulled, and finds that way to get to meet up to each other. So it'll
Okay.
say Corey's beating this guy, who's beating this guy, who's beating this guy, who's beating this guy, who's beat you, and then it'll find the other pass for you, and it'll do it 5 times, and it finds all those different methods.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I
and
was
then
actually kind of curious about some stuff like that, because I remember I was in that 240 pound Super 64, And I remember you saying that you guys had like kind of like ran simulations to figure out like what the likely outcomes might be. Like I think it'd be kind of curious to see um like eventually, like for instance, like let's say a promoter is using your bracket and they're ordering it by elo like they should, and it gets in there, and there's like this kind of predictive thing where it says like this guy should beat this guy. So it's like, I don't know, I just think it would be kind of cool to to be able to like see it, and things like that. And then it also gives you, like, as the competitor, like that little extra internal motivation. It's like, oh, the system is saying that this guy should beat me. So it's like, I don't know, it's almost like when you put in a location in navigation, it says it's going to take 14 minutes. It's like, bullshit, I'll get there in 12. It's like,
Yeah, so one big push I'm been trying to work towards is Elo rating seeding of brackets. It's technically already built in the system. It just doesn't pull the number automatically from the site yet. So you can hand do it into the bracket right now, and it will seed the bracket properly, just like you're saying. It'll say, Corey's a 1900, and he's gonna pull. So he's the number one seed, and then the number 16 seed will be pulling him. Just like they do with basketball, the same thing. That functionality is already built. The way to get people to do it, I think, is a little slow right now, but I'm working on some better methods. But yeah, I think seeding brackets would totally up the game of arm wrestling. Another big thing you kind of pointed on to earlier was in the 64 we did simulations. So when I build the 64 bracket, not only am I grabbing all your elos and putting it in top to bottom range, I'm also doing that calculator I was talking about, like your best wins against another person. I'm also doing a total best wins average number, using that number to help seed you better. And then I look at an overall picture of you as a puller in general. So like every single match you've ever had, comparing against to another person that have every single match they've ever had. And I use that to seed you as well. So the 64s are the most ideal way of making a single bracket, and have the best likely outcome of greatest matches every single round. Bar none, there's no other way to do it. We hit every single bridge when we go do the 64.
and I really like the Super 64 because it actually makes all the rankings across the board more accurate, because you're getting people from all over the country coming. So that way it's not just like, I remember when it kind of like a year or two ago, when it was a little bit newer, people were saying like, oh, but like if you're rated 1600 in this region, like you'll probably still lose to like a 1450 in this region just because it's more competitive or whatever. So it's something like the Super 64 where you get the people coming over and crossing over. It kind of like corrects those little bits of imbalances where, um, because I can't remember the term, but you use like this term for it, in the Super 64 group chat. But there's some people whose ratings are a little bit higher because they just go to the same two tournaments every year, and they're just like pulling and beating the same guys over and over and over. Uh, but and that kind of goes into like the main argument that I see anymore for the elo system, is where it's like, oh well, if you just compete more, your scores can be higher. But if you keep beating the same guys and their level is staying the same and yours is going up, then you're gaining less and less points every time. So it kind of like, it's not really like, you're not going to become an 1800 just only beating 1500 people. So
Yeah, that we call that elo farming, and yeah, it's like you said, they sit in their backyard and they pull their backyard tournaments, and actually it exponentially gets worse. So if you're pulling in your backyard and you're pulling the same people in your backyard and they're also not going out as well, you will increase, right? But that increase it starts off fast, and then as they drop off, you start going like this, and then you basically hover. You don't go really far at all because they're continually dropping. You're continually gaining, but then you hit like a max peak point where it's less than a point, and you just kind of sit here flatline, like just barely going. I also like to use Tim Lewis as a prime example of that, because Tim Lewis is constantly pulling super matches against people very, very far underneath him, and he's gaining like 1 to 4 points per super match. When the average guy who'd be pulling that guy would gain like probably 40, 50 points. Tim one time pulled it was like a it was like a double super match round robin nonsense. He pulled like three people with a round robin. I don't know, it was something crazy. But he ended up winning, but he lost one match to three people, and his elo dropped negatively overall because the one match was so impactful to the rating. It wasn't worth pulling those three people. And so, like I said that a lot is the elo farmers will find you, and when you're found and you get put up against someone who's better than you and you lose, you'll drop like a rock, and that's exactly what it should happen. You know, it all comes out in the end. It's right there. But
That's funny. Because actually, like most of the people in my circle, like that's who they all want me to pull next is Tim Lewis. So
Tim's left arm is very strong. It's not fast. It's very very strong. He has a very good sticky spot. He's actually a really good arm wrestler, but he lacks speed. He lacks hand control. Um, most of the time he loses on being too slow, and most of the time he likes those long drawn out matches against guys who don't know how to change positions and stuff, and he'll sit there and burn you. And that's why he'll take those little matches and maybe win $500 here because he don't care. He just wants to arm wrestle. So he pulls the other weekend and wins a match or whatever. I mean, the thing of it is like another thing you kind of alluded to is your rating is not extremely accurate until you get over a certain amount of matches as well in a certain hand and a certain weight. That's kind of one of the reasons I put some stipulations on the 64 because I need to have a solid base for what you are. If there, I don't have the base, then it's hard to tell what you really are. So typically, for very accurate, for like let's say we know who you are kind of person. Anything over about 60 to 70 matches total per hand, I know exactly what kind of arm wrestler you are. When you're about 25 plus, I would say it's about 60 to 80% accurate matches per hand. And in anything below 20, like I would venture to say anything 15 to 20, 15, 25, somewhere in that range, we're about 50% accurate of what you are. Um, and obviously, if you think on the average person, you're pulling the average guy probably pulls three, 4 times a year in a tournament, and he's pulling probably if he goes 0-2 every single time, that means he's pulling what 8 matches a year. So that means I need probably 3 years of data off of him to figure out how good he is. I mean, that's the realistic terms. So you're talking a new guy who's new to the sport. I have no clue. It's not going to be accurate. A guy who's been pulling for a year or two, meh, a little bit accurate. And a guy who's been pulling for 3 or 4 years, I pretty much know who you are. I mean, it's pretty accurate.
yeah, no, that's one big difference too with like the elo system in terms of like things like chess or competitive video games or anything. It's like someone can go in and play like 40, 50 matches a day, and whereas like arm wrestling is going to take a little bit of time to build up that database, but like you said, like once there's enough matches in there, it's like most people, there's always those like freak of natures that have like that exponential rise early on, so maybe the data is just like going up like crazy. But for the most part, like you said, I think 20, 30 matches especially, you pretty much know how they are as a pooler, or especially over the course of a couple years. And I'm curious too, is there like any kind of like degradation system built into the elo, like for like if you don't pool for 4 years, maybe it starts degrading, or something that can, outside of just wins and losses, that can affect the points?
Yeah, so there's two big things right now. The number one simplest thing is that anything on the classes page, so the whole list of everybody, anything on the classes page has a 2-year do not participate and get hidden. So you don't degrade, you just hide from that page. All your ratings and everything will still be under your pullers page forever. They don't go away, but you are hidden from the what we call active classes. And that's a 2-year mark. And that's per weight, per hand, per everything. So you could still be active as a puller somewhere other weight, but not that weight. The other one that we do, that's kind of a big one, is that any amateur polls, so anything that's labeled as amateur or novice, goes into the system as a degradation of 200 points. So, because the theory there is that you can pull amateur and pro, but a pro can't pull amateur, and pro can only pull pro. So an amateur has the ability to pull more matches. And since he has that ability, he gets a degraded point value of 200 negative until he meets a requirement. The requirements are a minimum of 10 matches as pro or open, and or he has a 50% or higher win rate in the pro class or open class. Um, stuff like that. So there's a couple of things there. And what that really does, in my opinion, is incentivize the amateur to stop pulling amateur and say, okay, well, I see I'm a 1300, but in reality, I'm probably a 1500 because I'm being degraded 200 points. So the second I get out of pulling amateurs and I pull matches as pro or open or whatever, that degradation goes away and I'm rated as an actual real puller. But those matches still count. They still kind of help me figure out who you are and who you were, all that stuff. So,
Yeah, and that's actually really good that you touch on that because there was aspects of promotion that I want to talk to you about too. And I think that incentivizing people to pull pro after a certain amount of time is like a really big part of the sport. But see, I sympathize with the promoters because as I've been like working with a lot of them with a lot of these live streams and stuff lately, I understand like the money aspects of it, where it's like it is cool that there's like a guy who's going to pull 3 amateur classes and 3 pro classes. That's a lot of money for the promoter to get back and be able to put into more events and whatnot. But you see so many guys pulling, it's like their third, fourth, fifth year in the sport, sometimes even longer. And they still, they really like getting medals. So it's like they still pull in the amateur class and they pull in the pro class too. And I'm just wondering, like, from your perspective, like when you're running an event, like how do you feel about that? Or like don't you feel like that discouraging that, or do you think it's in the promoter's best interest, like when you see a guy that is just going to come in and dominate all the amateurs, and like does it behoove you to tell them, you know what, you need to pull pro because you're taking away from the actual amateurs in this case?
two things here. There's two big things here. You maybe have noticed this. I don't know if you have or not. But the last 3 years since AERS started, I have been doing tier classes at all my tournaments. I don't even call them pro, amateur, or novice. Sometimes I'll put the word just because people, in their brain they see that or whatever. But what the tier is, and also another thing we have in the background, is at a certain amount of matches, I have the ability to tell what level of puller you actually are. And you might not think that. See, this is the part that kind of aggravates people. You might not think you are because you're number one in your state or whatever, no one's beating you, all that kind of stuff. But Aries can tell me you are a novice, amateur, or pro. There is a very specific bell curve that happens in the system, and it tells me exactly where those overlaps happen. And that is the level for that class, for that hand, for that weight. It tells me exactly that is the level of person when they become amateur or pro. You know, it does that automatically. That is not a made up thing. That is simply the polars have proven that those lines intersect. That is where that level is being crossed. So what I do with my tier system is I basically justify the ability to be one or the other. I'm a promoter, so I know how much it is to hinder people's ability to make money, and I never want to hinder their ability to make money. All I want to do is justify whether you should or should not be in a certain class.
Absolutely.
And I think, like you said before, I think personally that your ability to be a novice, an amateur, and a pro should be very fluid. And I think, one tournament you're a pro class because you can't qualify for anything else tier wise. You go in there, you get hammered. And next thing you know, you drop into the second tier. Well, then the next tournament you go to, now you can pull that second tier and you can pull the other class. Let's say you go through and you win the tier two, and you do horrible over here, but it counteracts it. So now you jump over back into the next tournament, you're back into tier one again.
It's a self-correcting system.
Exactly. I think ideally that is the best route for everybody because that way there's guys who are not very good at all at arm wrestling who just love arm wrestling and they want to be in the tier 3, which is the for fun class, the novice class or whatever you want to call it. And they'll do well in that class because that is their level. They don't want to go in amateurs just because they've been pulling for 10 years and they get beat on by the amateur guys. They want to go in the class that they actually can be competitive in. And I think a lot of promoters are so stuck on the money thing, and they added semi and all this other crap in there, and that's fine, but justify it. Don't just make it up. Justify why you're doing it. Like you could have four, hell, you could have 10. I don't care, but justify what are the reasonings for being able to qualify for that class is crucial to making it better for everybody.
Yeah, I really like how you do it with Colorado State because I was going to bring that up. And I do plan on going this year. So if I remember this right from the flyer, you allow people, like you said, like if you're below that rating threshold, you can pull up into that next threshold, but if you're above it, you can't pull down. And so that to me is like the most elegant way to do it because it's like, okay, if you really think like you can pull up in this class, like go for it. Like maybe you can, maybe you can't. But based on like you said, like what we see from the numbers and what we see from the system, like you didn't just pick like an arbitrary number and say, hey, anyone above this is a pro. Like you see that, like I'm guessing that there's like a steep drop off at certain points where certain people just don't get above those thresholds. So you're like, I know that if you're above this threshold, you know what you're doing, so you should be a pro. And so I think that that's a really, really good system. And I wished. Now I know. Do you feel like, I guess where my kind of thinking or issue goes with it? Do you feel like you need like a certain size of tournament in order for this system to work out? Because like I feel like probably 70+% of tournaments, like most tournaments around the country, are like the average class size is 6 or less.
Yeah, no, I don't think you need a certain size tournament. Again, most of the time, people's opinions of what they are fairly accurate. So they're going to probably be in the same class anyways. But there is some people who, um, don't win very often or went through a losing streak or whatever else. And maybe they drop down to the next lowest one. And by dropping down to the next tier, like tier 3 or whatever, yeah, they may win it. They may not. I don't know. They may be really competitive. And all they're doing is helping me help everyone else. So not only are they improving those guys and putting them where they belong, he then comes over this class and puts himself where he belongs here, and then and so on and so forth. Does it affect your tiny 100 entry tournament? No, not really. If anything, it makes every single bracket that much more competitive because you are more accurately defining the bracket. And that's all I really care about is getting the classes to be more competitive. I don't care about how many people is in the class. I want it to be if there's four guys and it's extremely competitive and there's wars every match, that's fantastic. I don't care. But if there's 20 guys and those 20 guys are very close in elo range, there's a really good chance that's getting even better. So because that's what everyone really wants, right? It's not so much you go to a tournament and you pull either six guys in your class. It's not about that. It's the fact that there's six guys in your class and the other five are within 10 points of you. And you're like, this is probably going to be really tough. It's not that there's one guy that's 250 points above you and the rest are 300 points below you. And you're just the oddball. Like, you're going to win probably against all those and you're going to lose to for sure against that guy. That's exactly what it would happen in a normal tournament. Now I'm saying, no, you're all within 100 and you're all going to be really close. It's going to be a fantastic bracket and that's the goal. And then you seed on top of that and you get even a better example of what should happen. So yeah, that's kind of my angle with that whole thing is trying to is show how tier-based ratings classes in the long run produce better tournaments. Not more money, but you could just add more tiers, I guess. But I think it produces better tournaments, better outcomes, better, more competitive. It's just like the 60 designed to make those matches difficult. And That's essentially why everybody arm wrestles. They don't want to just go there and wax everybody. I mean, sometimes, but
Yeah, no, like if you're good enough and strong enough to do it, then great. But yeah, I've never not heard someone say that they didn't want a war in arm wrestling. You know, um, and what else? I was also going to ask you about your opinion on weight classes, because for me, especially as someone who's only so I started watching arm wrestling towards the end of 2020, and then I started competing at the end of 2022. And one thing that's always been frustrating is the fact that no one uses the same weight classes. Like they might even be under the same, they might pull, they might be IFA or, whatever other organization, but they just use, it seems like they just use random weight classes. Like there's no regulation or anything that keeps people to conform to it. And I know it's kind of a tough because there's a lot of things in my head where I see like the really big organizations, like they have a weight class every 5 kilos and some do it every 10 kilos. And then some promoters, because they want to have more money for prize pools, they might only have like 4 or 5 weight classes, period. So I was just wondering where your head was on that as a promoter.
so this one is a very big struggle across the country. I come from the end of things where all roads lead to Worlds, right? So regardless of IFA, WAF, I've been to both. But in my opinion, if your end goal is to Worlds, you should somehow correlate to those classes. The betterment of the entire sport in general, making up your own weight classes is kind of just like trying to spread the peanut butter differently on the bread. It it's the same thing, but you're just trying to be different. And in America, so I don't know if you know how overseas works, but overseas, you go there, like, say, a single country, they don't have promoters, hundreds of promoters that run hundreds of tournaments. They have one or two, maybe three tops, and they all run under WAF. They all run under IFA. They all run under a single body of organization. And they dictate the weight classes, they dictate the rules, they dictate the tables, they dictate literally everything. The United States of America does not do that, and everyone runs rampant and does whatever they want, and that's why we have 400,000 promotions, and everyone wants to think they're doing the next best thing and all this stuff. And if anything, that ununitedness has made arm wrestling in America good and really bad at the same time. It's good because there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of different things going on, but it's also really bad for the fact that we are not united in anything. Like tables, I mean, for God's sake, how many times have you gone to a tournament and you and it's Joe Schmo's wooden table, and then it's got a bar across the middle, and the pads are different sizes, touch pads are this, that,
Yeah.
peg not be there, you know. Hell, I've arm wrestled on wood. It's so crazy how the realm of tables goes back and forth.
Yeah, there's this one tournament here. It's called the Big Sky State Games, and like the number one reason that I don't want to go, even though it's right in my city, it's like a 10-minute drive away, is because they use like this table that they paint. Like the Big Sky State Games wants it to be like this red, white, and blue table, so they made this custom table. And the thing is one, it's like 2 inches or 3 inches taller. So as a short guy, I'm like, okay, this feels really terrible. And then on the top of it, there's all these exposed bolts. So every time you slip, your like hand or knuckle will hit like one of these bolts and just bust open. It's just like, so this table is like the number one thing that stops me. But there's usually like good guys like Roman Gromov or people like that will kind of come to this one. So it's like you don't want to miss out on pulling some of those people. Yeah, no, I totally get that. And it's so frustrating or showing up to a tournament and the table's not bolted down and you're just sliding around everywhere. Or like you said, the pit, like it'll be a legacy table, but they'll have like homemade pin pads on it that are like 4 inches too high. And like you don't even get a chance to stop somebody because you're already pinned if you even just are just a little slow on the go. And yeah, it's super frustrating for sure.
The only tables that should be not uniform are kids' tables. That's it. Like literally, that is the only one because literally there is no specs. There's nothing out there for them. You're just guessing. But uh, yeah, I mean, as simple as getting everyone on the same table. Rules will be never impossible. Everyone always wants to make up their own damn rule. It seems like the strap is pretty much the same. Like that's probably the only thing that's unified. But the type of strap material, all that kind of stuff, kind of a little bit things here and there. But yeah, that is probably the one big thing that uh, everyone kind of jumps all over the place with. My personal opinion with my tournaments, and you've been to a couple of them, is I never slouch on refs. I will pay the extra money to bring in the best refs possible. I think it makes or breaks your tournament. I literally do. They can be, if your refs are really bad, you're gonna get a bad outcome and people aren't gonna be happy. But most guys know that when they come to my events, they're getting the top, 10 guys refereeing possible. And, they're not gonna have any complaints typically. So that's just my personal opinion. I do pay extra to make sure that happens. It's just my thing. The A lot of events don't care. They will bring in, Joe Schmo's brother that watched 6 matches on Over the Top, and next thing you know, he can ref anything. And that's fine if you're willing to produce a product that is of that level. But also don't come in and say, well, I'm putting on the best tournaments in the country and running with $100 refs that have never been certified, barely been to a tournament, don't even know what arm wrestling is half the time. So you got to be realistic.
Then, like one of the promoters I work with here was just asking me like, what kind of things do I have to do that's gonna like draw in, make sure I draw in the arm, like he's doing a lot of things to try to draw in a non-arm wrestling crowd, but he doesn't want to forsake the actual arm wrestlers themselves too. So he's like, what are the background things I can do to make sure that the good poolers are going to show up and want to come? And one of the things I told him is, you have to invest in the refs, because if on your flyer you show that, like Luke or Bill or one of those guys is reffing, you're going to get a lot of guys who come just because they're reffing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you notice how, like, when I put my posters out, I always put the ref crew and stuff because that is true. I do get a lot of people that see the ref crew and they're like, "Oh, wait, he's got fucking 6 masters coming or 5 masters coming." Like that, in my opinion, I think some people really enjoyed that. I think they they go to places based on quality. Some people are about the awards, some people are about the money, all that kind of stuff, but a lot of people just want to be at a good, fair, ran, quality event, and that's what I bring. I don't bring all the flash sometimes and the fancy stuff. I'll do nice awards and some prize money or whatever, but I bring smooth ran and quality refereeing. That is the key to my events. I don't think that brings in the best, everybody, but I think for the crowd that I cater to, I think they enjoy that. And they would rather go to a tournament ran properly, ran correctly, refed properly, decent awards or whatever, some money, and know that they're not going to get screwed over type of thing.
100%. Yeah, I think that and also being refed, and because one thing you can't deny, especially in these days, especially in the US where social media is kind of king and like word of mouth is king, uh, like having in the background of your videos or something the same refs that are refing like East vs West and King of the Table or Knuckles Up, like any of the big promotions, like that's like a cool plus. But it also brings me into like the next kind of like big subject I wanted to talk to you about is rules specifically, because I think one of the big hot topics in arm wrestling in general these days is like, how do we become more appealing to the masses? And it usually always comes down to the rules. And I'm wondering for you, since you've been in it for so long, you've pulled under like the strictest rule sets, and you've pulled under like not strict at all rules, like recently, like at the dark card or dark, is it dark horse or dark card? Yeah.
Yeah.
Where like are you personally willing, like, do you think certain amounts of degradation, like for instance, in the setup, reducing the strictness of the rules to the point to where setups are faster, we get started faster. Do you think that's worth it? Push the sport forward, or do you think there's a way to kind of keep the purists happy, keep the rules strict, and have the sport still grow?
So to better answer that question, it depends on what your idea of growth is. Some people's idea of growth is getting more stuff like East versus West. Some people's idea is the Olympics. Some people's idea of it is $1 million arm wrestling tournaments.
For me, it's just viewership increase, just raw numbers of people interested in the sport.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, if you're simply talking about how do I get more people to watch arm wrestling, I don't think you have to change anything. I literally think the way arm wrestling is ran right now has nothing to do with people watching it. It has the simple fact of where we do arm wrestling. Like, you'll notice that most arm wrestling events are at weird bars and grills out in backyards and stupid shit like that. Like, that's why arm wrestling doesn't grow. Arm wrestling is not put on a big stage, regardless of the event. It doesn't matter what it is. But, like, I'm a big thing with, like, in my town, I've been trying to get on a big stage for a while, but it's really difficult. I don't have big money. So to get it on at like Frontier Days, like my end goal would be to have it on Frontier Days, like before a concert or something, and have 60,000 people there watching. Even if they have no clue what the hell's going on, it would be fantastic. And I think that's the biggest thing right there is we don't put ourselves in that light because there's not enough money. And then people are like, well, you need to make it faster. You need to change the rules. You need to have better refs and more lax stuff. And somehow that'll make it more appealing. It's like, no, not really. I mean, fucking look at curling, dude. Curling is the most boring sport you've ever seen in your life. You slide a rock down there and use a broom. It's ridiculous.
See, I'm always one of those people who like I personally one, I don't care, and two, I don't think arm wrestling needs or has any um benefit to joining the Olympics because like you said, what did the Olympics do for curling or for skeet shooting or for like it's still just the people who care about it who does it. Like us joining the Olympics won't all of a sudden make the world care about arm wrestling, you know? Um
The only
it's
thing the Olympics will do for arm wrestling is bring it
make
to
it worse, honestly.
well, yes and no. The Olympics will do two things. It will put us in a different light. It will it will hinder, not take away. It will hinder the use of steroids and all that stuff. It will not take it away. We already know that's not
It'll
going to
never
happen.
take it away. Yeah.
Um, it will allow for certain, I would, and I'll use this word lightly because when you're an Olympic athlete, you're not a pro, you're an amateur. It will allow for amateur based arm wrestling to be sponsored athletes and literally almost do arm wrestling as a living, which will be huge for arm wrestling. And just the ability to change that methodology of why do I arm wrestle? Like, do I arm wrestle to go to nationals, to go to worlds, to go to the Olympics, or do I arm wrestle because it's in my backyard and then I'll go to the East versus West event because it was down the street from me. I want to go practice at this guy's house once a year and maybe arm wrestle twice. Like, the level of arm wrestle will change dramatically with the Olympics coming. But it will also redefine, those people that are willing to take the sacrifice to get to the Olympics is going to change those people. Um, like personally, in my opinion, is I would love to go to the Olympics. And if I were to be able to go to the Olympics, I think I could end up being one of those people that could get sponsored enough to potentially make a living at arm wrestling in an amateur level, sponsored, athlete kind of way.
My big fear with it though is what you see across other sports where it gives one governing body, like whoever the Olympics latches onto, IFA, WAF, whoever, it gives them a lot of power and it brings a lot of politics into it. Then all of a sudden it's like, if you are an IFA sponsored organization or event, you can only use this brand, like, and then the brands will have to pay a fee in order to be certified by that organization. And then it starts turning into like this political and gatekeeping thing. And it usually always goes really bad, you know?
To be whatever, but it is that way right now. I mean,
Yeah.
it is that way right now. And the problem with WAF, so the Olympics would have to go through WAF because they're the only WADA sanctioned arm wrestling organization right now, and until WAF were to lose that somehow. But if it were to go through WAF, or I should say, the reason why it hasn't gone through WAF is WAF is unwilling to give up that power. They have millions of dollars right now, and they're not going to give up that millions of dollars power. They would basically be signing over their rights to arm wrestling to the Olympics. And like you said, the Olympics will tell WAF, nah, you're not going to do that. No, you're going to change this. We're going to take this. You have to have everyone wear Reebok. You can't do that. Which again, good and bad. I would love for WAF to like basically lose some power because they are full of themselves and steal money and everything else. But to know the simple fact of that That's the only thing stopping us is WAF's ability to not have power anymore from being in the Olympics. Man, that just drives me crazy. And 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 just because we're in the Olympics doesn't mean the rest of arm wrestling doesn't grow out of control. Like you'll still have East versus West and all this other nonsense that just explodes because people be like, like think about the stupid breakdancing thing that was in the Olympics. I did that shit in high school and then I was like, oh, it's in the Olympics. So I watched it and it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But how many other people watched it? They're like, oh my God, it's in the Olympics. That's why is arm wrestling not here? Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you think about what is in the Olympics versus what isn't. Uh, Especially when it comes to like arm wrestling, like it's often called like the oldest sport in existence just because it's like what's more simple. But that's like another issue of growth that I see is I feel like sports that seem to grow a lot have a very powerful way of like merchandising the sport.
Yes.
Arm wrestling, it's like you can sell a $4 strap, you can sell t-shirts and like what like hats, like what else, you know?
Yeah. You can sell, sorry, what you're getting to is you can sell stuff to arm wrestlers. You can't sell anything to anyone else.
To fans, like that's what's the hard like there I think there is and I see it a lot at some tournaments, especially here in Montana. There's people who come to every tournament. They never pool. They're just fans. They come to every tournament around. They just like to watch arm wrestling, you know? But there's nothing to sell to them cuz like they're a fan of arm wrestling. They're not a fan of arm wrestlers.
That's the thing is like you almost have to go to like the Game of Arms kind of realm if you want to sell arm wrestlers. You got to make a story about it, make a show, and that takes an extra ton of money that no one really wants to put forward to. But to sell it in the Olympics, that's the route you would have to go. You would have to sell yourself as a person, not a arm wrestler, or have some like unique disability that like allows you to be good at arm wrestling, or like me being really small compared to everyone else I beat is big, or stuff like that kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. There is literally nothing to sell to people. There's nothing to sell to them. You're if anything, it's like WWE, right? WWE doesn't sell shit to anybody. Like maybe an action figure, I guess. But other than that, it's like t-shirts, maybe a hat, maybe a signature with it on a t-shirt or something. But past that, you're selling entertainment. You're not selling anything else. So that swings back to Aries here. How do you get more entertaining matches? Well, you make them come through Aries. You make them be very, very close in elo rating. You use the system to its fullest benefit and say, okay, this match they might be two amateurs. You have no idea who they are, but we know based on statistics this should be a very, very close match, and that should be exciting to watch.
That's perfect because one thing that I talk to these guys about a lot too, and I'm glad that I feel like more people are coming around to it, is if you want your event to be exciting, you have to make good matchups. Like so many people are so obsessed with getting a name, getting a name. We have to have this name. We have to have, but who cares if you get this big name and he comes through and he just blows through everybody and it's like with zero effort, you know? And so making good matchups will make your event so much more exciting. And I think if you get a chance, I would really welcome you to watch the Armsgeddon event that we just had last weekend. I think that the production we put on, the entertainment, the rule, like I think it all came together super well. The one aspect that we're missing that I really want to work on is what you're saying is like, and it's kind of my goal with this channel too, where I'm doing like athlete profiles and stuff. I'm trying to introduce people to the athletes that are going to be competing in these events. Um, to make me more people fans of arm wrestlers and not just arm wrestling. Because, you know, like you said, two guys show up, you don't know anything about them, but now they're just arm wrestling. Like, why? Like, what's the backstory? What's their shit talk? You know, maybe this guy works in the same industry as you, so now you're a fan of him, you know, because you're both carpenters or something like that. And you know, so I think there's a lot there that can come from it. And I really like with Aries, the like I said, that ability to be like, okay, these guys are within 30 points of each other. This is going to be a good match, you know, and not utilizing that. And like I said, just going off a name. Oh, this guy, I heard this guy is really good over here. So let's just put these two guys together and see what happens. But there's literally a system on the internet right now that you can use to do the matchmaking, and it's going to tell you if it's a good match or not.
And on top of that, like you said, it doesn't always has to be, let's say it's a good match, but then you use the polar profile, to say like, well, Corey's in IT and he does computers for a living. He's basically a nerd, and he's going against this guy who builds houses for a living, and he's 40 pounds heavier. But statistically speaking, this matchup is ideal for whatever, and all this. You can add a whole bunch of dynamic to it that a lot of people will like. Well, how's that going to be a good match? He's outweighed 40 pounds, and you're like, it's because of this,
Right.
and he's smarter, he's faster, he does this, and statistically, they're basically the same person. And people like statistics, right? I mean, look at football, look at any other sport. You're caring about yards and catches and everything. I mean, they track everything, and it's all somewhat elo based as well with football, like how they do power rankings and everything else. It's all elo based stuff. So I think the more people use that, the more they bring it into the sport, the more they compare people to each other and compare their likes and differences. I think that's the next realm of getting people to like that person, whether it's they're loud and screaming and yelling and whatever. Maybe that's that guy's thing, or maybe they're calm and collective and hit fast or whatever else. Like there's a good and bad to both of those. Some people like the yelling and screaming and all that crazy stuff, and then some people like the guy who doesn't say nothing and just murders people. Like that that is there's two realms there that are really cool and can be both played off of. You know, so yeah,
Yeah,
there's
there's
a
oh,
lot.
go ahead.
No, I was just saying that there's a lot that people don't utilize and could utilize to make the sport more interesting and more uh, relatable. I guess that's the word. I want it to be more relatable. Like everybody has done arm wrestling at least once in their life. You know, across the table from a friend or whatever else. At least one time. All I want to do is make that more relatable back to them. Like yeah, I remember arm wrestling when I was a kid, and I did this and that, and then this guy turned into a computer nerd, and now he's top 2 in the North America. Like, I could be that guy. Like that's all you have to do is spark that interest of, oh, I could have been that guy, and sky's the limit from there.
100%. And there's kind of like two more points I wanted to get into. One of them I forgot to bring up earlier. I'm curious with like Aries, was there any unintended benefits or consequences or just like things that came up that you just never were expecting or like just oddities just from this whole process of creating this system for everybody to use?
I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of little things. I'll point out the benefits so far. I think I've single-handedly got 95% of America towards one goal with promoters. I know most of the promoters, they don't like to work together. I think that I've somehow made that happen. And by just submitting the brackets, I've made it easy. I've helped them. The bracket system or whatever. I think that is probably the single greatest thing that our Aries has done is brought promoters together without actually having them to be together. And that, I mean, as crazy as that is, it literally is the only thing out there that is somehow unified most promoters.
Yeah, that's true.
The bad things, let's see. The bad thing is that I've like I told you before, I've had instances where people don't want their stuff shown. And to me it's kind of crazy. Like they're so it's almost good and bad, right? It's almost like I'm glad that they don't want it because that means they care. And then I'm also like upset that they don't care like enough to make it better.
Like
So
Damon.
yeah, it's kind of like a rock and a hard place. Like I've had like not very many, probably 5 or less that have asked to be removed completely, and I essentially tell them like, I can't remove you. If you go to arm wrestling events and they send it to us, it's gonna show up. Like it is impossible for me to remove you from the system. Your information will be there. I guess we could hide their profile, I guess, but no matter what, you're still gonna be there. You're gonna if you pulled him, it's gonna show you being pulled, and I don't know how to get around.
Yeah, that's crazy to me.
It's like they care enough to go arm wrestling, but they don't want everyone else to know that they arm wrestle or something. I don't know. So that was like one weird thing that's happened. We've had 3 instances ever where someone wanted to hide their name because they can't legally be seen with their name on the internet, which is kind of bananas.
That's yeah, that's actually really interesting, but
That was a that was a tricky one. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, well, let's see. Are you gonna register as this every single time? Oh yeah, I'll register as that. And I'm like, all right, I guess. Don't
yeah,
ever register as your real name ever again.
yeah, just register as a fake name or a stage name or something.
No, it's got to be known to us because otherwise you go in as random shit and it never matches up.
That's true.
But so we've only done that like 3 times. So don't make that a trend. We're not putting people's nicknames in yet.
That'd be hilarious.
And I don't know. I mean, like the other weird thing is like it's kind of like like state rankings and stuff like that.
I love that.
People have all their state rankings and all that bullshit, and so then we turned on the ability to tag your state in Aries, and it started to end up, slightly different than what their opinion was, which again, rankings are opinions. And so they're like, "Well, that's not true. I beat that guy." And I'm like, "Okay, like that's great. You beat him. However, statistically speaking, you're not as good as him. He wins more, he does this, whatever." So I guess in a weird way of saying it, I don't think arm wrestlers were ready for Aries. I don't think they were ready to be statistically analyzed. I think I think for the last probably 20, 19 plus years, I think most people have been just considering arm wrestling as power and technique. That's it. They don't care about nothing else. And now that there's a system that allows you to statistically analyze your performance and evolve as an arm wrestler mentally, I think that is also kind of I've seen negativity towards that. Because you got guys who are like using the system to avoid people. They're using the system to better themselves and go after the correct people. So it's like goods and bads there, but like it never was a problem before. Like most guys just went to tournaments and pulled whoever just because they didn't know who was going to show up. Now they can go on the thing and say, statistically speaking, Corey's been in every single Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico. I'm never going there ever again. And so that kind of hinders stuff sometimes, maybe, you know?
Yeah, and that like leads into what I was going to ask as well. Is like for you when you're looking at the numbers and you see a lot of the data that isn't present to all of us yet. Uh, where kind of are those breakpoints for you where it's like, okay, if they're below this, like I know from the flyers, was it like 1525 or 1550 you have set for pro? But like, what are those breakpoints where you say if they're under this, they're an amateur. If they're over this, they're like an entry level pro, and if they're above this, they're just good. You know, like you respect them.
Yeah, so it is just to be clarify, per weight class per hand, it is slightly different, but the averages are pretty similar, and there is sometimes where there's a big steep drop off and stuff like that. But typically speaking, when a guy is, we'll just say the low end first, when a guy is below the 1400 mark, so 1400 below, those are what we call beginners, novice, low level arm wrestling. That's that level. So when you're 1400 below, you are what you are. And that again is per weight class. It's a little bit slightly 20, 30 points difference. When you get to about a 1400 to about we'll call it a 1500, 1520 mark, you're a low end to a mid level amateur. I'm around that level. When you're a 1520 to about the 1560, 1550 mark, you're a high-end amateur to a very, very low pro. The cutoff for being like an actual, real, legitimate, I am a pro mark type thing for me is about the 1580-ish mark, around 1580, 1590, somewhere around there. Basically, anything 1600 plus, you're a pro for sure. 100%, no questions asked. You're a pro every single time. 1580 plus, you can kind of start. saying you are what you are kind of thing. Again, all that also applies to if you're actually have enough matches, per hand, per weight, all that stuff. Um, that does make a big difference. The levels in between of those, like level of pro, level of amateur, you could get really definitive there per weight class. The problem is that like we kind of pointed out a couple of times is that some guys I know that are what you and I probably consider pro arm wrestlers who arm wrestle open classes all the time. They're probably sitting in that 1550 to 1580 mark. In my opinion, that is like the spot of where you're on the edge. You're literally a really good amateur or you're barely doing it as a pro kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
Um,
where I'm at.
you
For my main arm, it's like a 15. I think it's right around 1550 for my left arm in the 220.
okay. I was just looking you up real quick.
And I'm in there as Andrew
We
Equinton.
gotta fix that. You have three different spellings.
Yeah, I think someone might have put a dot after the M on one of them.
They put a period on you, those sons of bitches. I'll fix that real quick. But yeah, no, that's the thing is like, right in that range there, you're in that realm of I don't know for sure, but I do know kind of basically what you are kind of thing. And yeah, it's not always good to like people just don't want to hear it, I guess. They really, really don't want to hear
Yeah.
it.
Everyone wants to think that they're just a little bit better, you know. But but like I said, I think it's good to have a quantifiable way because like as long as you're going up in points, tournament to tournament, like you're doing the right thing, you know. And even if it's only like 3 or 4 points here, or maybe there was a really rough tournament and you went 0-2 and you lost a couple, it's not the end of the world. You just got a bad draw, you know. But if they're that much better, then you're only going to lose. Like I think, like when I lost to Clifton Erickson, I only lost like I don't even think I lost a whole point because he's like a 1700 or something. So it's yeah, no, like I said, the system does self-correct itself. So it's not like losing's the end of the world if some oh if you get beat by, like a 1650 or 1700 plus rated guy, you're probably not going to lose almost any points.
It makes it also realistic for you to judge yourself too, right? Like you basically just pointed out, like you knew going into that match with Clifton, it was the likelihood you're probably going to lose, but you're challenging yourself. If you got a win off them, it just shows that you're increasing type of thing, and that's what I want people to do. I want them to see that and say, "Man, I might not win this thing, but I have a pretty good chance of getting a win because I'm within 20, 30 points of them." But and then that'll level you out, level him out, over a time. But yeah, the once this updates, I'll be able to know for sure. But yeah, that's the thing I wish what you just said right there. I wish people would do. I really wish they would take the extra step to look at I am this, I want to be this, I need to pull against this and use the statistics to better themselves as an arm wrestler. Don't just arm wrestle to arm wrestle. Arm wrestle to improve to do the next best thing. And that is put yourself in situations that you can succeed. Maybe go and we don't really tell people this, but we have another thing that I forgot to mention. We have the ability to rate events. So the event as a whole, I can tell you what the average ELO was for the entire event, and we call it an event rating. And in my opinion, it would be fantastic for you to know as a puller to say the average ELO at this tournament or per this class was in my range. I want to go to that tournament and because it's gonna be competitive. And then, you start doing stuff like that where you're like, hey, wait a minute. That tournament right there was a 1590 average. That means it's like really good pullers are there. And I'm a 1400 guy. I don't really want to go there because I'll probably get murdered. So I go to tournaments that are small and, work my way up. But a guy like me who's like a 1900, I want to go to that tournament because the average level person there is pretty good. So, that's the thing that I have on the background that I've been kind of delaying because I'm afraid that promoters would get upset about it. I think they'll kind of misconstrue what I'm doing with it because promoters don't want to be told that their events aren't very good, you know.
Yeah.
and they'll judge it based on who they think is good at the tournament kind of thing, but really it's not about that. So I'm reluctant to push it out, but I think as a poller, it would be fucking awesome. Like it would be so cool to be able to say the top 10 events were had 500 entries or 300 entries or whatever, but the average elo that shows up to them for the number one was less than the guy, the term that was the number five best term in the country. And I show people that, that stuff on the background for like Colorado. Like Colorado's elo rating for the last 4 years has been really high. Like we have really good people that show up. And like Arizona State, same thing. They have really good people that show up. Michigan State, on the other hand, is humongous, but their average rating is a little bit less than those two events because they get a lot of people. Winter Blast, for another example, and I've told Ryan this, and he agrees with that. But Winter Blast is probably the biggest, best high-end amateur polling in the country, bar none. There is no other event that does not cater or that caters towards high-end amateur arm wrestling like Winter Blast does. And the average elo range supports all the information. That's what they do. The 98% is all about those people. That event is a high-end amateur polling, and they get those numbers. Like Colorado State gets high numbers, but it's slightly geared towards better arm wrestlers.
Right.
And I think that's great. I literally love Winter Blast, the fact that they gear their stuff to those people. There is more amateur arm wrestling than there is pro arm wrestling. That is bar none. I mean, that's why I designed the 64. There is more of those people out there than there is ever going to be pros. And it's funny that I'm bringing this up because in on the 76 Super 64 chat, you know how they get all stupid and everything. Uh,
Yeah.
one of the guys brought up like, how do I like what you said? How do you define an arm wrestler? How do you know there's a pro? And so I brought that up for one of the classes, and I think it was the 76 class. And he's like, well, that means there's only like 100, maybe 120 pro arm wrestlers in 176 pounds in the country. And I'm like,
Yep.
yeah. That means there's probably about 19 to 20% of the arm wrestlers in the 176-pound class are pro. The other 80%, or probably 60% are amateur, and the other 20 are probably novices. And he's like, that just doesn't seem right. And I'm like, think about it though. There's only what 2,000 active 176 pounders in the last 2 years, and 20% of them are pro. That doesn't sound accurate to you in the whole country?
Yeah, that's pretty solid. I like, in my opinion, I think that's even like probably a good number, you know? That's a
Yeah,
pretty healthy number.
that's actually probably one of the bigger classes. And
Hmm.
just looking at, I'll just skim it real quick. So in the super heavyweights, right-handed, there's about 163 people that are actively considered pro out of 2,766 people. So that's that's less than 20%. That's pretty low. But again, that seems pretty accurate to me. I mean, there's there shouldn't be that many pros. People are jumping to pro before they should be, and it's okay. It's okay to not be a pro.
And there's something I was thinking of, and I'm trying to think of how to word it, so hopefully it makes sense. But so I know you guys have uploaded like a lot of like legacy tournaments from the past that you got information and brackets from. And so like there's like one thing that I see a lot of people kind of like, I wouldn't say necessarily get up in arms about, but they're like a little, they just talk about it where you have big names in each class, like your Paul Lynns or your Michael Todds or John Brzanks or whatever, who haven't really been active in the tournament scene for a long time, so their ratings don't seem as high. It's like, why is Michael Todd not number one on the super heavyweight, or something, or Jerry Caderet? And do you think like just leaving the points as they are is okay, or do you think certain people, just even for the sake of ratings, should get like a boost up there, like or should just be like, shouldn't Michael Todd just be a 1900 like at base, like if they are competing at East versus or a Paul Lynn or something like that, just because that's what they're. Or do you think just leaving the numbers the way they are? Because it's like once you get to like that top 10 or 20, kind of almost like doesn't, I don't know. To me, it's like they're just super good anyway. So what does it matter? You know?
The classes page is designed in an aspect of active in the last 2 years for events here in the United States. I'm not looking at matches that are ran overseas and all that kind of stuff. So that's that. But it's the closest thing to a ranking that is current, that is mathematical, non-opinion based we can possibly get. Because Michael Todd doesn't pull in very many tournaments, he wouldn't be on there. But all he has to do is pull one match at one event that is in the United States, and it will guarantee that he gets right back put on the list right where he belongs. I mean, it's literally that simple. If people care, they will show back up. And yeah, Michael Todd is probably, probably should be really close to the top. But as far as active pullers, like right now, active puller, Wallace Dilly just went and crushed literally everybody at the underground thing that Bob Brown just put on, and now he is the current number one right-handed person. In my opinion, Wallace Dilly should be the number one. He has wins on Corey West, but he's also lost to Corey West. He hasn't pulled Michael Todd, and John will soon die off of there too. But he did beat, he beat people who beat Ron Beth. He beat Marcio Barbosa. I mean, he beat guys in the top 10. It's very, very accurate. So no, I don't think we need to adjust anything. I think what it is right now is actually very accurate. Even with them not pulling enough, they're one match within 2 years, and they'll be back on the list if they were hitting anyways. So, and plus, most of the time, like a guy who only pulls once or twice a year, most of the time they're pulling against guys who are good when they do come back, and it adjusts automatically just because of that. So it's a catch 22, right? They might not pull enough, but they're pulling the best, and they're in the top 20 guys, and they can jump points dramatically really fast. Unlike unlike a Tim Lewis who's pulling nobodies, who's pulling 100 matches a year, and he's gaining 10 points over the whole year because he's pulling a bunch of nobodies and losing to a whole bunch of nobodies. So it's, in my opinion, is not bad to have them not pulling. I'd rather them pull, but the system is designed to showcase the guys who are actually competing, who are within the last 2 years, who are active, who are not just dormant. And if they are dormant and they come back right where they belong, right? It's pretty simple.
Yeah, kind of like I said earlier, like I feel like in almost all cases, just because it is a mathematical thing, it's just it's self-correcting in almost every situation. And so that's probably the thing. I know that's not like the emotional answer a lot of people want to hear, but it's just like you said, it's kind of just raw data, and you can take it and use it how you feel, or you can disregard it, but it's still what it is, and it's not going away. And I,
Never
I do believe that it is the best system. And I really wish, and I know kind of like started off as a North American thing. And I'm glad to hear that Canada's getting into it. It'd be cool if Mexico got involved too. And, or even just like overseas, because I just don't know how anyone just doesn't look at the system and think that, like, why would we not want to be a part of it? Because it just makes arm wrestling as a whole better, you know?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think you're onto it right there. Is what is it hurting? Can you think of any negatives by seeding brackets? Can you think of any negatives by bringing in more competitive matches? Like the only thing that like I told you, the only thing that I've ever seen that someone complains about is the fact that they didn't want their stuff presented as losses, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm sorry, but everyone loses. It's not great, but there's too many good to outweigh the bads.
I mean, I lost my last two super matches and they're right up on there. So it is what it is. But yeah, as we close out here, is there anything else you wanted to say or anything you think that's important to bring up about Aries or just say in general?
I have some big aspirations with Aries. There's some things I've been working on that I can't really point to at the moment, but I think that they would bring the next level of entertainment to arm wrestling, and it will be used through Aries and stuff like that. I really think the 64 stuff is a big avenue for us. I would love to see a 128 man super 128. Like I think that
That'd be
would
really awesome.
be fucking insane. With stupid money behind it. Um, I am all about the average arm wrestler with Aries. I mean, Aries is designed for those people, and, and I think that the more that Aries grows and is adopted and used and talked about and stuff like that, the better. I think there's people that are trying to use it negatively, which is bad, but you can't stop the negative. But if I have one single goal before I quit arm wrestling, it is to somehow make the average level arm wrestling extremely easy to go anywhere and do anything in arm wrestling. I want to have a shit ton of sponsored athletes. Like I want a ton of them. And I want to make it to where that guy's got 20, $30,000 of just being able to travel and go anywhere he wants. That would be super ideal to have Aries have hundreds of sponsored athletes and they're literally able to go anywhere they want because they don't have to worry about money.
That'd be amazing.
And in that aspect alone, it grows a sport, right? I'm putting other people in Montana. I'm putting other people in California. I'm putting people over here simply because they never would have gone before. And then you make those connections and like bringing a Richard Cogburn here and then put him against a super match. And then he's never even been to Colorado. And next thing you know, he's in Colorado and all that kind of stuff and making arm wrestlers known because of the 64.
And for people who want to support what you're doing and make it better, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. Right. So I guess I never mentioned that, but, the 64 is all self-funded. I don't make any money off of it. All the money goes into a Wells Fargo's account or no, sorry, Liberty Mutual, uh, Northwestern Mutual, account that it basically is self-generating more and more money. So I have a bunch of guys who sponsor it. Like Danny Gillian is a big promoter of us. He gives us money every year to or every event to grow the sport. Most of the money that he promotes goes to all the awards, all the prizes, and extra payouts, and into the sponsorship if there's extra. I would love to get other people involved if they want to be involved. You know, sometimes they tell me, I want to help you with the awards. I want to help you with refs. I want to help you with bigger payouts, and I just make it happen. I don't say, "Oh, well, I need this." Well, I don't need anything. Like the money that the arm wrestlers are putting towards was designed to pay for the tournament in the first place. So anything that anyone helps us with is just helping it get bigger and bigger and bigger. Eventually, I would love to have a solid sponsor that is putting up significant amount of money, and like I said, putting up to the point where a Super 64 gets you 20, $30,000 type of thing, where we're doing $100,000 tournaments, and it's not about it's not about the, well, I might make it, like with ours, we had what, 8, 10 guys drop out. Like I want to the fact where I get 64 and they're all signed up and they don't do nothing but get ready for this event. Like it's that important for them to win this thing. So the more people I want to help, just get a hold of me, email, messenger, whatever. I'll basically do anything, shirts, whatever, designs, like I said, I don't make money off this. It's simply because I want to do it for everyone else. I think it's a easy thing for me to do to grow the sport and promote Aries and show how it works and show how the benefits are happening from it. And eventually, one day down the road, I'm going to hit a sponsor that makes life changing money for everyone. And then this thing is going to go through the roof.
Yep. That's all it takes is one big sponsor.
And then I'd like to tell you what I was working on, but I think if that works out, that's the meal ticket. It's gonna blow your mind. And if it all works like it's supposed to, it could be the next thing that makes people not tens of thousandaires. It could make them millionaires potentially.
Wow. I'm definitely excited to see how all that plays out, and I definitely have faith in what you're doing. Because, like I said, I think you're at the forefront of it, and you're the person who is showing that they want it the most. They're not just using words; you're actually doing things to push things forward. So I really appreciate that, and I'm sure a lot of other people do. And Corey, thanks for coming on. It was great to have you. I definitely want to do this again sometimes, and maybe we could get Frank on too. But yeah, that's it. If you guys like this conversation, you like this type of content, please like and share, and we will catch you guys next time.